Good morning. It's June 1st, 2020. I'm Pastor Rusty, and this is your daily inspo. Well, we're coming to the end of the I am statements of Christ in John. We're at the seventh one today, and it's found in John 15, verses 1 and verse 5. And he's walking with his disciples. This is just prior to his crucifixion, and he's been instructing them and teaching them. And he says, I am the vine. Then in verse 5, he says, I am the vine, and you are the branches. Abide in me, as I abide in you, and you'll bear much fruit. So Christ is teaching and preparing his disciples for life and service and discipleship beyond his death. Now, they weren't still aware of everything that was going to happen yet, but Jesus said some very important things about the vine and the abiding. And so we look at this word abiding, and it means to dwell, to stay, to remain. And so Christ is teaching about discipleship, and he uses this metaphor of the vine. And he says that God is the husbandman, the one who prunes and takes care of the plants. And so it's an agricultural metaphor. And so teaching the disciples, he says, abide in me. Well, that's an interesting word because, as a branch, unless it's attached to the vine, it can't produce anything. And Jesus says, listen, I am the support. I am your vitality. I am your life. Concerning discipleship, he says those that don't remain, they wither, they dry up, and they become worthless. And the husband, the husbandman, the farmer cuts off the vine and pitches it in the fire because it becomes of no value as far as discipleship or as far as kingdom work goes. Now, I don't believe in it for a moment that he's teaching that he's going to take some of his believers, and if you're not producing fruit, he's going to cast you into hell. That's not the teaching here. He's using a metaphor. But if we're going to produce godly works, if we're going to produce the things that God empowers us to do, and this not seeking our own, not serving our own, not just taking care of me and my stuff, as I've said so many times, but living a life of vitality attached to Christ, through Christ, attached to him, staying in him, is what the Bible is teaching here. He says, listen, if you do, you're going to produce fruit. You're going to produce fruit that looks like what it's supposed to look like. You're going to produce discipleship fruit. You're going to love your neighbor. You're going back to the Sermon on the Mount. These are the things that are going to produce, because he's our life source. He is where we get our energy to produce godly fruit. And see, I believe that's a choice that we make. We can live our life for us, or we can live our life for him. And so many people are torn between the two, or waffle back and forth, and they're like a wave tossed in the sea. But Jesus says, abide in me. And then later on he says, listen, you will ask in my name, and I will give it. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. See, it all goes back to living in him and dwelling in him and having him as our purpose. And when we ask, we'll be asking according to his purpose, and we'll be asking according to discipleship, so that we may serve him, abiding today. What a wonderful thing to just have our being in Christ and live for and walk in and focus on Jesus and his teachings, because that's the full life. That's the rich life. That's the life he promised to give us. He said, I've come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. Later on this same chapter, he talks about abundant living when our focus and our desires and our wants are God's things. We live in God's things, and that's abundance. Listen, I hope God blesses you today. I'm Pastor Rusty. I'll talk to you tomorrow.